Welcome to another episode of TRVC. My guest today is İnalcan Guleç. He is a senior associate at Eksim Ventures, which is a corporate venture capital fund of Eksim Holding. And we'll get into what Eksim Holding does as well as Eksim Ventures. Welcome, İnalcan. Thanks for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
I think this is going to be a really interesting episode because it's the first time we're talking to a Turkish CVC, a corporate venture capital arm. And so that's also an important part of the ecosystem. But first, it would be great to just start off with your background. I know you also have a background of time in telecoms. I'm also with Turknet. We had Dilek Dayınarlı on the podcast, who was also spent some time at Koçnet, another telecom company back in the day in Turkey. So it's interesting to see the path from telecom to venture. I mean, actually, it makes sense because for there to be internet companies, you have to have an internet. So the telecom companies are kind of the front runners in the ecosystem to all these things that came out afterwards. But I digress. It would be wonderful to hear your career path and how you got into a corporate venture capital where you are today.
Thank you for this kind introduction. I've been in the ecosystem for the last 4.5 years. 1.5 year spent in a B2B SaaS startup. For the last 3 years, I've been in the CVC ecosystem. Just as you mentioned, prior to making my way into the VC realm, I was present in a couple of industries, telco being the longest. Prior to telco, I was also in the automotive industry. I was in the hospitality industry, taking up certain commercial roles within these corporate realms. But I mean, 15 years back, during the dawning of the VC ecosystem per se, I was actually lured by the burgeoning, like the brewing VC ecosystem. But certain things kind of stopped me from really venturing into venture capital per se. First and foremost, I do not have a Big Four background. I do not have a financial background, like in terms of academics. I do not have a technical background. Rather, I come from humanities and political sciences background with philosophy, political science, etc. So I kind of stopped myself from really thinking about stepping into this VC realm. Instead, in the first 13 to 14 years, I was in the hospitality, automotive, and telco businesses. And looking back now, the way I analyze startups, the way I act as a team member of a revered CVC fund in Istanbul, all these experiences really paid off. I mean, they all contribute something to the way you analyze startups.
So you made a jump first from a corporate job to a startup, you were saying. Is that your path into venture afterwards?
I think it acted as a bridge to my final destination, so to speak. I think it was the first couple of months of the pandemic, the COVID, and we were trying to navigate our path amid the challenges of like careers, like how do we survive, how do we do our jobs, etc. So it was a time of reflection. It was a time of trying to assess one's purpose in life. And I crossed paths with a B2B SaaS startup with certain AI capabilities. And I really loved the idea. I really loved it. And
what was the name of the company?
It was called MeasurAI. It was it was an Istanbul company, but we also had a subsidiary in Estonia to make sure that it scales globally from that destination. It was all it was a wild ride of 1.5 years. I oversaw many of the commercial operations there, like pricing, grant applications, go-to-market strategies, etc. We were a boutique team of like commercial people and the developers, like back-end, front-end developers, and some ML professionals. So we were always a close-knit team. So it was a great opportunity, but of course it was a rather turbulent time within the team.
What happened with this startup? MeasurAI, you said, right?
Yes.
What happened with MeasurAI? Is it still continuing, or
the project is on hold? They're continuing on a different path, and
so they pivot.
Yeah, they pivoted and they do certain field work. The SaaS business type, a decision was made to put the platform on hold. But of course, we had some great learnings, and we actually launched a member get member program prior to its launch, and I think we were met with great interest, predominantly from the Turkish market, but also from Canada, from the United States, even from India. I don't know how they really heard about us, but it was great to see so much interest in that product.
B2B SaaS, and what was the product or solution exactly?
In a nutshell, it was a web analytics platform we actually applied to TÜBİTAK due to its intrinsic capabilities. 6 years back, AI was still there, of course, but enabling AI in such a platform was still a rarity. In that context, it had certain novel capabilities.
It was marketing departments to understand the web flow and their websites or the journeys.
Marketing professionals, e-commerce professionals, bloggers, so on and so forth. But the initial plan was to debut the product with a rather narrow clientele, marketing and e-commerce, etc. And we actually had initial traction with promising results. Each day, the ML's capability to diagnose the issues and ML capability to guess the root causes of the problems on a website, etc. It was improving day by day. And that was the main outcome that we actually planned for as we were applying to these grants and as we were formulating our go-to-market strategies. But yeah, 90% of the time, that's what happens.
And so how was the transition then to Eksim Ventures? You left there, and then how did you find out about Eksim Ventures, or how did you get to know them? How did they get to know you?
Through our conversations, I do have a commercial background, so I am connected with different people, with different interesting individuals and different interesting functions. But during my time in the startup, I came across different people, either VCs or people aspiring to establish VCs, etc. So one time I came across a LinkedIn message of one of our former presidents of business development, Mutlu Bey. And I just wrote to him. I just DM'd him. Can we have a conversation with you, sir, etc. So we agreed on a timeline. I think it was the beginning of 2021. And it was quite an interesting conversation. Mutlu Bey is quite an analytic person. He also has a telco background, about Nortel networks in Canada, in Turk Telecom, in Turkey, etc. So, and he asked me some compelling questions because, just as I mentioned, I have a breadth of experience across different disciplines, different industries. So, Inalcan, what is your purpose in life? What are you planning to do, for the rest of your life? And that was quite a compelling question. And I think I kind of tried to answer that question in a persuasive manner. To which extent I was successful, I don't know, but
you got the positions.
Yeah, I got the position exactly.
And so were they just setting up Eksim Ventures at that point, or was it already established?
It was already established. A year had already passed before I joined the ranks.
So it was still fairly new.
Yes, it was fairly new. They had started investing in funds of funds. They also had completed a Series A investment in Yolcu 360.
They were investing in other funds.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
As a fund of funds. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So the story was beginning to take shape at the time, but as the team was being formed, the momentum increased. So I joined the corporate VC arm of Eksim Ventures in 2022, and we started. We increased our scouting efforts. We increased our ecosystem development efforts in unison as a team. So in 2021, at the years that the fund was established, there was one direct investment, Yolcu 360, at its Series A, and 3 different funds of funds investments. But in 2022, I think we managed to complete 4 investments and 2 more funds of funds investments.
So let's take a step back and tell us a little bit about Eksim Ventures. And maybe would it make sense to talk about Eksim Holding first? Because not everybody might know.
Sure. Next year, Eksim Holding will be celebrating its 40th anniversary of its establishment. But before that, of course, it was a rather classical commercial company engaging in food production and trade, like wheat and flour trade, etc. In 1986, the holding was inaugurated, and it was still a wheat and flour production and trade company with export capabilities. Towards the end of 1990s, the energy industry was tapped into as well. In 2000s, energy production was coupled with electricity distribution business. Where we are today, Eksim Holding is a company that's mainly active in the industries of energy, clean energy production, electricity distribution, and it's a more historic business, food and agriculture production. And currently, the holding is managed or overseen by the second generation. But we know for sure that before the second generation took the helm of the company, there was the appetite, there was the inclination to really integrate more into the ecosystem, to really get a grasp of what's going on in the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
So just because there's some well-known brands that are, right? There's a chain, Aslı Börek is part of Eksim Holding. Other brands we might recognize that are...
Yeah, some household brands, just as you mentioned, Aslı is one of them. Aslı is a rather recent addition into our portfolio, into our food portfolio.
It was acquired.
It was acquired. It was an M&A transaction, pretty much commensurate with the establishment of our corporate VC fund. But the more historic business would be the wheat and flour part. Okay. And I think Sinangil Flours is one of the household brands. It occupies the top 3 or top 5 spots in the market, not only in the country, but also in the markets abroad, for which we are very proud as a corporate identity. So yeah, those are pretty much the brands. And as a company that really has R&D at the core of its operations, we love R&D in launching new products, even in an old business like food and agriculture. Since it's joining into the portfolio, Aslı has been transformed in quite a significant way. Of course, the essentials are still there, like the pastries, etc. But there have been new additions into the portfolio of its offerings, like of its menu. The team, the R&D people, the product development people are always working like around the clock to introduce new products, new concepts. Mm-hmm. And we also have launched a new food brand called Sanogastro, which really caters to the needs and preferences of a ever-growing customer base with different food preferences, different food sensitivity.
So it's a brand that's in supermarkets or it's a retail chain?
That's a great question. I mean, the latter brand that I just mentioned operates on a small shop or shopping shop kind of basis. But of course, just as you mentioned, Aslı's products, along with Sinangil products, are also find their ways in the retail chains as well. Mm-hmm. Like you can find them in different retail chains across the country, and which is also a significant market presence for the brands, just as you mentioned.
So, and just one other thing, maybe energy distribution. You're on the distribution side, not so much energy production.
Both
production as well.
We have
alternative energy, right? Renewable energy. Sorry,
renewable energy. Exactly. We have a bit over 2,000 megawatts capacity in terms of our renewable energy portfolio. That mainly comprises wind, solar, hydroelectricity, and biomass. Not only in the country but also in its vicinity, like Romania, Georgia, Ukraine. We also have certain considerations for the new markets. And where we are present, we also try to increase our renewable energy footprint with the inauguration of new fields in those markets. And the electricity distribution side, we have a subsidiary called BIGG that provides electricity to 2 million households, 2 million households, enterprises, farmers, different types of clientele in the southeast part of Turkey. For those who may be novel to this ecosystem, there are 21 ICOs or electricity distribution companies in the country, and BIGG is one of them. But it's among the first to have established its own R&D unit, and it's a robust R&D unit, employing hundreds of people, even in AI. Because each geography presents its own challenges. Like you have to tackle different challenges, and there's no one-size-fits-all kind of a product that can really cater to your needs. So you have to be creative. You have to be resourceful in developing these capabilities. But of course, that's also one of the streams that really helps us, Eksim Ventures, because they share their capabilities to launch partnerships launch different collaborations with startups because they are prone to working with startups or scale-ups that really develop specific needs, specific capabilities for these needs. As a CVC fund, as a 40-year-old or a bit over 40-year-old CVC fund, I think one of our significant capabilities is our ability to cooperate with internal stakeholders in the company. And most of the time, how we operate is if we initiate a conversation with a startup, we try to look at it on a twofold basis, like irrespective of whether we invest in that business or not, we try to evaluate whether we can form a partnership with that brand, with that startup, be it a pilot, be it a POC, be it a, full-fledged commercial collaboration. We try to look at it. And we have been lucky to form such instances. Like there are certain startups that we have not invested in for different reasons, but we happen to be one of their key accounts, one of their biggest customers in terms of their invoice value, total contract value, etc. And sometimes we have invested in startups, but we are yet to work with them on a corporate basis, on a collab basis. Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting. The dynamics of a corporate venture capital arm are a little bit different, and so I think really interesting to cover specifically Eksim Ventures. What is the structure a little bit? Because sometimes there are sort of venture arms of companies that are actually investing off of the balance sheet of the company, but you've created one or maybe even more actual fund structures. Is that right?
Yes. It's a VCIF or GSYF.
Okay, so you have a local domiciled Turkish fund structure.
Yes, we work with Email Portfolio. It's our portfolio management company. We work with them. It's a significant partnership. As I said, it's a VCIF, and we abide by the VCIF regulations of the board.
Which also means you have to invest 85% of your investments have to be in Turkey by value, I guess.
Yes. Of course, but I'd like to take a step back there because, yes, I mean, as far as our VCIF capabilities are concerned, we abide by those rules. That's for sure. But there are times when, you can't really follow the VCIF principles. Like there's a business, there's a diaspora business, like youthful people having emigrated to the United States, creating a significant story, etc. And the appetite is there, like, our IC really wants to invest, etc. So we try to make sure that those regulations do not constitute a showstopper there, quote unquote. So there have been instances where we invested in businesses out of the balance sheet, or subsidiaries, etc. But of course, from a categorical point of view, we try to. We do our best to abide by the VCIF regulations, and we have followed the principles.
Do you have a fund structure outside of Turkey as well in a different geography, or it's just the GSYF?
Yes, it's a GSYF. Okay. It's a GSYF, but through that GSYF, we have invested in the funds of funds, as you mentioned.
Yeah, so that's another interesting aspect. So you invest in companies, but also in other funds. And are those funds also the local domiciled GSYF or VCIF funds, or are they sometimes funds that are abroad?
Yes, good question, and both. We have started investing in domiciled funds like Eksim Ventures, like 212 Alibey.
212 is based in Holland, I think, right? The sort of the fund structure. Okay. And what you were saying, BIGG Ventures as well, or
yes?
Okay, they're also actually based in
exactly. 212 Revo. These are
Revo
not
is based in Holland as well. Yeah,
exactly. So out of the balance sheet, we do have out of the balance sheet investments as far as the funds of funds investments are concerned. These three were invested in back in 2021. 2022, we started investing in the Deep Tech Fund in Technopark Istanbul. The founder one, a Deep Impact Investment Fund. We also started having conversations and started investing in US-based funds like Hibernite, Xsignia, Javelin, in Hypernova. Where we are today, we happen to be LPs with 9 different funds and 14 different startups and scale-ups. Typically, we've invested in post-revenue startups. Post-revenue, of course, it's a broad category, just as you said. Maybe 10,000 ARR or maybe not even ARR, just one-off fee, etc.
Okay.
I mean, just to be able to validate their PMF. If it's there, we want to be there as well. As far as food and energy verticals are concerned, we can be more elastic as far as there's a commercial stage is concerned. But of course, we try to prioritize their post-MVP status. And if I may also include some of our efforts in the ecosystem, so far we've run 2 different cohorts of our accelerator program, energy-focused accelerator program called Eksim Pulse, in close collaboration with Dicle Electric, our subsidiary, and the Electrical Markets Board of the country, Eureka. And we've crossed paths with different startups at different stages, various stages. I'm just crossing my finger, but hopefully we will be investing in a startup that we graduated from the last cohort of the program in the energy vertical. Coming back to my point in being more elastic in the food and agriculture as well as energy industries, we look at these startups on a different level. We also happen to be a pretty fresh corporate partner of Eureka Network. I think currently Eureka Network is valid in 48 different countries, and they have different subsets of initiatives. And one of the initiatives is called Investment Readiness Program, or IRP. Last year, we crossed paths during the Istanbul Global Innovation Summit. We had certain conversations, some fruitful conversations, and that conversation led to us becoming a corporate partner in their IRP program. In the first quarter of this year, we launched a call. We had a co-hosted webinar in which we welcomed close to 100 project proposals from like 40 different countries, majority from Turkey, and we shortlisted them to like 20 promising projects and startups, and we are still in the evaluation process. And now we're in phase 2, in which we will be introducing some of the energy or mobility startups to our energy business units for
Eureka Networks, it's an organization across Europe, or?
Yeah, I mean, from the get-go, it was an predominantly European network, yes, but in time it progressed to include many more different geographies like Singapore, like Canada, India, like all these different countries. And at the very beginning, Turkey was involved in its formation, and Turkey happens to be one of the financiers. I mean, along with the other supporting governments and states. As far as I know, it's the largest R&D initiative, one of the largest R&D platform in the world, covering 48 different countries, and the funds invested since its formation. The main motivation behind us becoming a corporate partner with such a revered and respected program is first of all, to increase our deal flow from a VC standpoint. Mm-hmm. But second, and maybe more important, to make sure that we are introduced to more capabilities from all around the world for our corporate needs, corporate synergy opportunities. And thirdly, if we want to make sure that we want to be a stakeholder in this, on a mission to introduce more Turkish companies to the world, because Eureka networks work both ways. Like you get introduced to a energy startup from Spain, from like Portugal, etc. But on a similar note, you try to increase the presence, like the market presence of a Turkish energy startup or food tech, femtech startup in different countries. And Eureka Network really is a significant NGO stakeholder in this ecosystem.
Can you share anything about the kind of the size of the fund?
Our corporate fund is a 25 million US dollar fund. But as it stands, we will be able to surpass this amount hopefully this year.
Is it a closed-ended fund? I mean, does it have a 7 or 10-year time frame, or is it open-ended?
Of course, it's a 10-year. It has a 10-year tenure.
Okay.
4 of which is already behind, 6 more to go. But the appetite is to make sure that it has a longer lifespan.
I wanted to touch on the fact that you invest in other funds, because I think that's a really valuable role to be playing, actually, because the ecosystem is fairly new. First funds kind of starting to be created around 2011, 12. And then with the regulation for the regulatory framework for the VCIF funds, the local VC funds, there's been an explosion since around 2019. And I think it's an important role to be a kind of a smart investor in these funds, to be evaluating them, and first to be bringing money, but there is money coming into the ecosystem, but to kind of be also, as they say, smart money, to have these kinds of funds that are investing in other funds that are then really evaluating and because you're in the industry, you're in the sector, then you have a better way of perhaps of evaluating other funds and being a bit more maybe hands-on with them than their other investors, in a sense, maybe. Which leads to the other thing, which is sometimes when you have funds invest in other funds, part of the motivation is also to have access to some of the deal flow. Is that part of the idea, and how have you seen that working out?
Yeah, just as you said. Part of the motivation stems from getting access to a high quality deal flow, like the quality or quantity. Like the quality is there, the quantity is there, yes. But you also get exposed to these different ways of like procedures, like because not every VC works the same way. They have different like modus operandi, so to speak, different ways of operations. They sometimes prioritize different. The essentials are there, yes, like the team, the market size, etc. You try to evaluate on maybe similar terms, but you assign different percentages, different priorities, so to speak. So you get exposed to these different ways of doing things, and it's been a great way to really get exposed to these different mentalities, different viewpoints, and it's quite
not just deal flow, but also seeing the inner workings of kind of how they do it. Makes sense. That's smart.
That's one of the key motivations. We have certain team members really working with our funds of funds, like going to their offices, working, etc. It's, I think, a great way to really share knowledge, because I think it was in one of your previous episodes where people repeatedly said, this is not a place for, this is not a place for competition. It's, as it stands, it's a place for cooperation. Of course, maybe there will be a time when people will be, when the VCs will be more competitive, even the CVCs in that regard. But I think the cooperation aspect is the main motivation. The learning curve is the main motivation for us to become LPs in these review funds.
New ecosystem, and so for the ecosystem to develop, for people to learn and be better investors helps everybody. Having a healthy market, a healthy industry is much better than an unhealthy industry, right? So as the industry develops, it helps everybody.
Yes.
That's a really good point. Is there a most recent investment you've completed that you can share?
This year, we invested in DefensX. It's a cybersecurity platform. It's, I think, one of Revo's portfolio companies as well. So we happen to be one of their co-investors in the platform. We recently got a green light for two new projects as well. One in a deep tech realm, and the other again in a energy realm. So we're pretty excited because we really want to be able to increase the momentum. When we have interactions with other funds, other other VC professionals in the ecosystem, be they in the country or abroad. Last year is a year that many wish to forget in terms of like the deal counts, etc., like the amount invested, etc. So we are really trying to compensate for the momentum, like
make 2025 better than 2024.
Yes.
2024 wasn't too bad, but mainly because there was one really big deal. There was Insider got 500 million from General Atlantic. But yeah, globally, it's kind of down years for VC. Turkey is maybe a little bit counter-cyclical, exactly. Right, to some of what's happening in the VC world and the rest other geography. That's interesting. DefensX, so cybersecurity I find cybersecurity an interesting vertical for Turkey because it's somewhat connected to the defense industry, and Turkey has a very strong defense industry, and it's also just generally a growing industry in the world, cybersecurity. And important. Did you have a particular interest in cybersecurity, or was it kind of opportunistic, or how did that deal come about?
At the formation or as the establishment of our fund, we had 6 or 7 different verticals. Defense technologies and security was among them. Where we are now, did we really comply strictly with our investment thesis, the set of verticals? No, we went above and beyond. We invested in other verticals, etc. But yeah, defense was one of the priorities, moving forward. We do have certain defense companies in our portfolio, like Quartis, Ankara-based scale-up, developing autonomous capabilities for mobility, for the defense industry. So we do have certain inclinations as far as this industry is concerned. Coming back to the question, we decided that it really complied well with our mandate and the opportunity was there. So I think it was a good fit for us.
We saw each other recently at the Corporate Venture Capital Conference that FIBA has been sponsoring the past few years. What is your sense of that part of the ecosystem in Turkey, the corporate venture capital firms in Turkey? Do you have connections or cooperation with other corporate venture capital firms? Do you have a sense for the size of the ecosystem, the corporate venture capital is fairly strong in Turkey, but I don't know if is that your view on it, or am I wrong about that?
No, that's fairly right, and thank you. We have certain connections with the other corporate VCs in different verticals, or maybe in the same vertical. We have close collaborations or considerations with group companies like Vestal, etc. Close collaborations with CVCs from the banking industry, etc. Every now and then we have periodical conversations with those CVCs, corporate VCs, to share our deal flows, to have conversations, and sometimes have candid conversations about the ecosystem going forward. I think, yes, this is a brewing ecosystem. I mean, the CVC arm is also getting more and more important because mainly because of its ability to generate collaborations within the company. But those collaborations need not only be in that company. I mean, if you come across a good deal, a good startup, and you find that that startup has synergies for you, we try to open this up for different conversations in different corporates as well, in the energy vertical, in the food vertical, because at the end of the day, it's a collective effort. I mean, most of the time, the fathers, mothers say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's the same to be able to raise a startup, to be able to, it's a collective effort, and you can't really confine all these efforts to your capabilities, to your organizational capabilities. You have to open it up for broader conversations in the ecosystem. And that's, I think, a significant, that really presents a significant learning opportunity, collaboration opportunity in the ecosystem. More and more corporates will be joining the ranks, hopefully. I think one of the driving forces behind is, of course, the legislative infrastructure, like the tax incentives, etc. But there are also some complementary milestones, like the establishment of the BIGG Fund.
BIGG.
The BIGG Fund, exactly, under
TÜBİTAK, Turkish Science Foundation, that is now not just giving grants, but also making equity.
Exactly. I've been fortunate to see the reaction of the establishment of a BIGG Fund on multiple fronts, because I take up certain mentorship activities with different startups from all around the country, and now thanks to EIT Digital, I happen to cross paths with from startups from Europe as well. But limiting the conversation to the country again, I have been able to see the reaction of different stakeholders with the formation of the BIGG Fund, especially when the news spread that they would be making equity investments. I think it was a bittersweet moment for the majority of the founders, because equity is something that's really hard to give. Letting go of a portion of your brainchild is quite a difficult thing. Yes, you would expect something in return, like maybe financial support, maybe some other collaborative support, maybe with mentorship or coaching. I don't know, but something needs to be there. But the fact that TÜBİTAK distributing grants not without exchange for equity, and now evolving to become
before they were getting the grants anyway, but not having to give equity, and now it's actually that they're having to get the same grants, they're having to give equity now, and so that's a little bit the kind of the bitter side of it.
But still, the non-equity programs and the grants are still there.
Okay, there's still other grants that.
Yes, exactly. But the big evolving to become an equity-based support program has been received in a bittersweet manner from a certain portion of startups or entrepreneurs. But credit is where credit is due. That program had to happen from a different standpoint, because there need to be checks and balances. Of course, when TÜBİTAK issues you a certain amount of grant, there are certain checks and balances. You have to make sure that they monitor you, depending on your progress, depending on whether that project came to fruition, etc. But the equity part was a bittersweet one, but nevertheless, that's a boosting power.
Yeah. What I like about it is a big driving engine for the industry can be incentives. We were talking about you play an important role as an investor in other funds, because you're going to be holding those funds accountable to driving returns. That's why I also asked about, is it a 10-year fund that you're managing now? Because it's important to measure the financial return. Okay, after 10 years, to be able to look back and say, here are the returns, here are the actual numbers. Before there are exits, you can do markups and you can say, we're at 2.3x or whatever on paper. But, the real clearest measure is money on invested capital, right? The distribution. What money did you put in and what money did you get out? And if you can measure that, then you have a sense, are we doing well? Are we not doing well? It'll be great for you. You can say, I managed this fund and we returned this much money. And so similarly for the TÜBİTAK programs, if they can look back over time then and say, look, this equity that we got from the startups that we backed, that we funded as a program, generated this much value. And so the ability to track it is what I think is important. Now, in the industry, a big motivation often is carry. So there's a personal motivation for the managers for it to do well, because they'll make money. But I think even if you don't have carry, there's a concept that just measuring is the first part of managing, right? Even just measuring returns is already so much better than not having clear measures of returns. And it's actually a lot of the debate we see on LinkedIn, et cetera, about venture capital returns is that they're not super clear, right? On some level, we have a sense that venture capital gives amazing returns. And then you hear a lot of naysayers saying, well, actually, if you look at it, it's only the top decile funds that are doing great. And then, so where is it, right? And there's a lack of clear numbers. And I think that's one of the opportunities for the Turkish ecosystem actually is to track kind of centrally. The regulation has the ability to do that. There is a regulatory structure that defines the VCIFs, the GSYF, Turkish VC funds, and so there's an opportunity there to have the performance tracked pretty clearly and openly and transparently. Of course, it's still early. Very few funds, if any, have completed a full life cycle. So in the meantime, you can track the markups, but it's fairly, it's not super meaningful. It'll start to become really meaningful once a first generation of funds has completed its life cycle and distributed or not distributed, and then to be able to look back and say, these are the ones that did well, these are the ones that didn't do well, and that feedback cycle, I think, will be super important. I went off on a tangent there, but from your perspective, it's great to hear what Eksim Ventures is doing. And then it also opens a window to understanding a bit more the ecosystem as a whole. What's your view of the ecosystem and where is it going? What would your projection be for the next 5 years in the Turkish ecosystem? Where do you see things going?
I think it's going to continue to grow, but of course, we can look at the momentum. Like, is it going to be like in this acceleration, or maybe you'll just pull your foot off the...
Things often go in cycles, right?
Exactly.
You have a period of fast growth and then slower growth and then fast growth again.
Exactly.
So.
I think in 5 years' time, there will be more of a clearer understanding of like the valuations, etc. Because given the economic circumstances in the country and also abroad, money is expensive. It's a challenge to be able to pick the right deal depending on the criteria and convincing the IC to invest a certain amount of money into that business, because at the end of the day, that money can be allocated, elsewhere.
You make a good point that interest rates in Turkey are particularly high. They've been high the past few years around the world, but they're very high in Turkey, and so that means a lot of money is going to interest rate investment as opposed to venture capital. Theoretically, then, if the interest rates at some point do come down, you might see a surge in venture capital investment in Turkey, which is kind of amazing because it's been growing pretty strong anyway, and so if it gets a surge from there, then it might grow, quite healthily. So it'll be interesting to see over the next 5 years. Running out of time, so let's switch to rapid fire questions. Is there a book that you'd want to share?
I happen to be an avid reader. I've read a couple of Amin Maluf books. Some of the books really resonate with our current times as well, like Samarkand. A couple of years back, I read one of his books, Violence in the Name of Identity. That also, it really, especially the latter one, really gives you a perspective of how things evolve over time, like in terms of how you define yourself, by which attributes you define yourself, etc.
He's a great author.
Yes, exactly. I'm currently reading another book by Isabel Allende called The House of Spirits. Maybe it takes place in Chile, and again, in turbulent times, resembling our times. I'm kind of trying to make up a bit of a lost time, because as a philosophy major, we used to read a lot of philosophy, like Kant, etc. I mean, it was quite a challenge to be able to flip a page in a matter of hours. Like,
right, you have to ponder.
You have to ponder. You have to really think hardly about what you just read, because even if you flip the page, you turn the page, you're still halfway certain about what it says. So I'm trying to make up for that lost time.
Okay. Last one. Is there a shout out to somebody you'd want to make either in the industry?
Thank you. So Father's Day was 2 days ago. I'm someone who lost his father at a pretty young age. I think I was 3. My brother was 10. My mother was 34. So we were quite a young bunch, so to speak. So shout out to my mother, who really rose to the occasion to fill a void, etc. And all these people, like fathers, mothers, taking up different roles, all these people. So yeah, all the fathers out there. So happy belated Father's Day. And sometimes when we share stories with the founders, with the entrepreneurs, they sometimes reflect on their past interactions with their fathers. Sometimes their mothers as well, but their fathers. And most of the time, the fathers tend to be skeptical. Mothers can also be skeptical, but they just don't want to discourage their sons or daughters. But their fathers might be skeptical. They might have different reactions, etc. But when they see the stubbornness of their kids, aspiring to be an entrepreneur, aspiring to make a lasting impact on the ecosystem, they happen to be one of the greatest ardent supporters of their kids. So the fathers that are not here, I also commemorate them with peace and with love and compassion. My last part of shout out would be to 3 ladies whom I know I've known through mentorship. One is based in one, like the eastern part of the country, and she's on a mission to create a deep tech solution tackling textile waste and renewables, etc. And she recently got invited to a social entrepreneurship award of Ibrahim Bodur.
What's her name?
Saadet Alpataş, and I've known her for over 2 years, and I happen to be on the board of her startup. Deep tech and these clean tech startups take a lot of time, take a lot of effort and a lot of patience to really be able to get where they aspire to be. The other one is a two-sister story. They are on a mission to create an AI or maybe computer vision assisted platform enabling parents to diagnose if their kids will have orthodontic problems like dental problems, etc. in the long run. And these sisters really complement each other in that the sister that I'm more in touch with is a revered orthodontic academician, and her sister is an AI professor. And, they have a small boutique but a strong team. So it's again, I happen to be on the advisory board. The company is Kedi Mobile, and the sisters are Banu Kılıç and Tuğba Önal Süzek. So my great respect for them as well. And the last but not least is again a deep tech company called BioLive. They're producing bioplastic out of olive extracts, olive seeds, etc. And they're actually experimenting with other agricultural extracts. It's an aspiring story, and they have FDA approvals, etc., to be able to scale into new markets. And Vestel was one of the key supporters of their project by integrating some of their products on their white durable goods, etc. We crossed paths thanks to a mentorship project called SmartNet Global, which was led by Ufuk Batum. So, mad respect for him as well. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity and for the last opportunity to give all these shout outs to these distinguished people.
Thanks for sharing those, and thanks for coming on the show. A really interesting conversation. I think your philosophy major background comes out, and so it's great to have different perspectives. So thanks for sharing yours, and look forward to seeing what Eksim Ventures does in the next 5-10 years.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here.